Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be Halloween Ends, number 2 would be Smile, number 3 would be Lyle Lyle Crocodile, number 4 would be Amsterdam, and number 5 would be The Woman King. And I thought for sure this would be maybe another easy 5 out of 5 because there's only one movie coming out that's going to upset some things. But I really underestimated how much Amsterdam's, lack of a big opening weekend last weekend would really affected this weekend. I only got 3 out of 5 of my predictions right. Some of you, like the ones being listed right here on the screen now, did not have the same problem I did. You guys kind of figured maybe Amsterdam will slip a little bit and lose the spot that Jackson is predicting. So let's do the opposite. And you know what? Good on you. You got your predictions right, and that is awesome. Let's see how you do next weekend. But for now, congrats. Let's go over what actually happened. Number 1 was, of course, Halloween Ends. Not a big surprise. Obviously, these Halloween movies always make money, especially these newer ones. I do want to talk about how the Blumhouse trilogy kind of stacks up financially. The opening weekend for Ends was $41 million this weekend. Now, this is on a budget. Wikipedia says 20 to 30. The numbers.com is a very definitive, like $20 million. So I will stick with 20 million just for simplicity's sake. So if we go by that and then also look at the worldwide total, it is at $58 million. It is $2 million away from tripling that $20 million budget. So already, Blumhouse movies usually make movies on the cheap, and even their most expensive stuff isn't all that expensive compared to some of these other movies because it, kind of ensures that no matter what they put out, as long as the audience kind of matches up right, they will still make back a profit. And that's kind of exactly what's happened here. It's been happening with these other Halloween movies too. I did want to point out though that as far as the other opening weekends go, it is $8 million below Halloween Kills' opening weekend. Please remember that this is, Halloween Kills came out in 2021 last year. So, getting out of the pandemic, people are coming back to the movie theaters a bit more. And Kills was also a day and date similar to how Halloween Ends is. So they're in theaters, but then they also premiered on Peacock, everyone's favorite streaming service. And I think maybe, they got as much money as they did in the theaters because maybe, Peacock isn't that popular. so maybe that plays a factor. So it's only $8 million below that, which isn't too bad. But for both of them, Halloween 2018, and yeah, different times when these movies are coming out, obviously, since 2018, but still, I do think it's interesting that that first David Gordon Green Halloween movie made $35 million over on its opening weekend with what Halloween Ends made. So 35 million over 41, that is 76 million. Definitely a drop off, like a really big one for Kills and then just a little bit for Ends. I think, there's fans, there's dedicated fans, and especially for the month of October, Halloween season, people do want to see spooky movies, and, Halloween is an IP. But I think it definitely also has shown kind of a waning interest. Word of mouth has kind of started to spread. Maybe some people saw that first Halloween movie and they were like, I didn't really like that enough to see more, and they skipped out on the other two. Maybe word of mouth started to spread like, yeah, if you like the other ones, don't see these. You might not like it. I didn't think it was all that great. It's kind of stupid, and maybe that pulled some people away. Either way, these movies are making money, so it doesn't really matter, but I just thought it was interesting just to point out like the waning interest in these Halloween films, but they're, they're made cheap enough that they still make money in the long run. But it's just fascinating to me. It needs $52 million more to outgross the entire domestic run for Halloween Kills. Worldwide, it needs $72 million to do that. And then once it gets through that, if they do manage to do that, if there's not like a big drop off in the next couple weeks, which I kind of doubt since this is the month of Halloween, but the box office can be surprising these days, especially with the big movie that's coming out next weekend. Or will that do well? We'll see. Number 2, we have Smile, still hanging in there. Like it had like a 30% drop on first weekend to second weekend, and now it has another similar 30% drop. It is barely dropping and still clinging on to the top spot, making $12 million this weekend. That adds to a domestic total of $71 million, and worldwide, it got a big boost. It is now sitting at $137 million worldwide. So let's break this all down. I was kind of bringing up some different stats. Paramount Players, which is the company kind of behind this movie now is the highest grossing film for them domestically, so it outgrossed What Men Want by $17 million and Dora by $11 million, but also worldwide. It it outgrossed Dora by 17 million. That is very impressive, you know, especially for this movie, and it's making the kind of money that it is, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just, oh yeah, it's the highest grossing one, but it's kind of like a modest kind of, you know, it had a modest run and it kind of came out in a drought. Not many people were seeing things. Like, it is able to, even though it's been out for like 3 weeks and Halloween Ends is fresh, it's still able to kind of compete with, like, hey, Halloween Ends could still drop off next weekend by like 50-60%, because that's just kind of what these bigger IP kind of fan things do. Smile is still gaining an audience and still gaining fans everywhere, so who knows, you know, the longevity of this thing even past Halloween. And then if you want to compare to other 2022 horror movies right now, it is 10 million away from outgrossing Scream's entire domestic run, and once it does that, it'll be behind Nope and The Black Phone for the top 3 highest grossing horror films of the year. Worldwide, very similar, it just needs 1 million to outgross Scream, and then it's, you know, top 3. That's incredible, you know, worldwide it gains such a boost to the point where, like, you know, domestically it still has a ways to go, just a little bit of a ways to go to outgrow Scream, but worldwide it's like, yeah, I could do that tomorrow. That's insane, and I love the success for this movie. I love that it's doing so well. Please go see this if you still can. If you haven't seen it yet, or even if you've seen it already, go see this instead of Halloween Ends. Let's spread that message. Obviously, with the big opening weekend that Halloween Ends had domestically and worldwide, it'll probably, you know, maybe, you know, outgross or just get very close to Smile. Well, that'll be interesting to see too, if Halloween Ends even outgrosses Smile, or if Smile just has enough traction where, you know, it stays ahead. That I will be analyzing that. You will be hearing from me on that shit. Moving on to number 3, it is Lyle Lyle Crocodile. They have a worldwide total this time, but it's just a little bit. It made $7 million this weekend, which adds to a domestic total of $22 million, and worldwide they're only sitting at $26 million. So with a $50 million budget, need to get to 100 to be considered a success. They still need $74 million to do that. Not very good. As far as the director's filmography, they still need to outgross their lowest grossing film, which is The Switch, $5 million domestically until it does that, and $23 million worldwide until it does that. Domestically, maybe, but the worldwide number, you know, it's just so low. I don't even know if they can get $23 million to outgross the worldwide run for The Switch. Jason Bateman's and Jennifer Aniston's The Switch. Crazy, you know? Like, this movie, and obviously it's coming out in October, Halloween time, no one wants to see a family film, but also, you know, family movies have been doing, like, the most consistent, obviously some exceptions, and I guess now Lyle Lyle Crocodile is part of that. Maybe just the idea is just a bit too silly, like maybe some kids are even like seeing the trailer and going like, what the fuck is this, a singing crocodile? No thanks, you know what I mean? I honestly, it's kind of hard to kind of pinpoint, you know, what exactly it could be, you know, maybe just lack of interest, or maybe families are waiting to see Black Adam because even though it's, you know, supposed to be, you know, Dwayne Johnson, I'm playing an anti-hero, I'm going to kill some people, you know, it's still a PG-13, you know what I mean? It's still a DC superhero, supervillain film, so, you know, maybe they'll be saving their money until they do that, I don't know. Sorry, Lyle, this is just not your time. Number 4 is The Woman King. This is the one that, you know, beat out Amsterdam just by a little bit, making $3 million, adding to a domestic total of $59 million, and worldwide it is sitting at $76 million. So $24 million away now from doubling its $50 million budget, you know. Ever since it came out, I was like, yeah, it has a strong start here, and then over the couple weeks, I was like, it still hasn't doubled its budget. This is actually pretty concerning now that I'm really kind of analyzing it and seeing it just kind of slowly kind of continue to make its money back. It's like, okay, cool, and I like that it still has some kind of longevity here, but damn, I just wish it was already there, you know. I feel like this movie should have been a bigger success. It's a very good movie, but I'm, you know, if we can get it to 100 million before it leaves the top 10, or if award season comes, it gets some traction and it comes back and it does it, you know, I'll be happy to see that either way. But let's move on to number 5, which is Amsterdam. At least The Woman King can rest well knowing that it's not as big of a flop as Amsterdam. It made $2.8 million this weekend. Holy shit. That adds to a domestic total of $11 million. So it is still, from what I said last weekend to now, it has still not outgrossed any of David O. Russell's lowest grossing films that have come out in theaters. So, you know, it still needs $1 million to outgross I Heart Huckabees, and then $3 million to outgross Flirting with Disaster domestically. Worldwide, it is sitting at $18 million. So it needs $2 million more to outgross I Heart Huckabees. It did outgross Flirting with Disaster by $2 million. So, you know, there you go. That's an achievement, I guess. But, you know, considering the all-star cast you have, I feel like you should be making a lot more money. who's to say why this movie isn't doing so well? Is it just lack of interest, bad marketing? People looking at the A-list cast they've assembled as kind of hypocritical because, they're working with a man who has, been in controversies. I don't know what the reason is. I have no idea. Let's move on to number 6, which is Don't Worry Darling, making $2.1 million, adding to a domestic total of $42 million, and worldwide it is sitting at $78 million. So yeah, it's $8 million over its doubling point at this point. So, it's doing fine. I guess it could be doing better, obviously. And it still needs about $27 million more until it triples that budget. And at that point, you're in a really good spot because you've also crossed over $100 million, gained worldwide. Maybe, because it is kind of like a thriller, horror, psychological thing, maybe this movie will gain a bit more in the next 2 weeks as Halloween kind of slowly approaches, a little bit in the first weekend of November for, leftover. I don't know. You know what? Maybe not, because we do have, like, Pray for the that's a horror movie coming out, Pray for the Devil. Shit, what else is coming out in theaters for horror? Maybe it will. I don't know. Waiting game. We'll see. Maybe it'll just mysteriously vanish from the top 10 and we won't have to worry about it then. But we will see. This is a waiting game. Number 7 is Barbarian, making $1 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $38 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at 40. So they have now, crossed over their $4 million budget 10 times at this point. That is incredible for this movie. That if you found the article yourselves, apparently a lot of studios didn't want to make it. Crazy that this movie is now, because the budget is so low and it gains such an audience because of word of mouth, that this movie is one of the most profitable ones of the year. That's crazy, like, please go check out that article. It's very fascinating, to see the insides of, like, what, people have to do to break through the industry and then what they have to deal with once they're kind of trying to get their foot in the door, still making their movie. Just find that article. It's on, like, the director or producer's Twitter. Very fascinating. Let's move on to number 8, which is Bros, making $920,000. Yes, we're in a weekend where the bottom 3 didn't even make like $1 million. They're in the thousands. Bros obviously got the closest. Now that adds to a domestic total of $10 million, so $18 million away from outgrossing Nicholas Stoller's film The 5-Year Engagement. Definitely not going to do that, and is still very, very far, like a $34 million away from doubling that $22 million budget. So I just don't know what else to say at this point. I've kind of covered everything. Don't need to dwell on it anymore. Just, maybe you shouldn't have released it in October. Maybe that's another reason why this didn't do that well. But let's move on to number 9, which is totally benefiting from its release. Terrifier 2, I talked about it last weekend. Very good horror movie, sequel to another really good one. $250,000 budget. This is kind of like if I remember correctly, this is like mostly crowdfunded too. And it went to theaters. People didn't know how much it was actually going to make there, mostly just for the fans that are out there. And it made $850,000 this weekend, which adds to a domestic total of $2 million now. But on a budget of $250,000, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, this doesn't really happen. I kind of talked about it last weekend, but this is insane that a movie like Terrifier 2, could actually break into the top 10. It didn't even need to get into the top 5. It is already making a profit, and it's very successful, and it's definitely, I'm sure, making studio executives kind of open their eyes, like, okay, there is kind of like an audience here for stuff like this, to promote this a bit more, Just very, very happy with that. And finally, number 10, Top Gun Maverick, making $685,000, adding to a domestic total of $715 million, $73 million away from outgrossing Avatar for the number 4 all-time domestic grosses of all time. Worldwide, it is sitting at $1,482 million, so that is $32 million away from Furious 7's number 10 spot for all-time worldwide grosses of all time. Not that it really matters, because this movie's wearing its successes on its sleeves proudly, and the fact that it is still here, despite me thinking that it was definitely going to be gone by this point, like, oh yeah, some of these other ones that have been straggling will now beat it out. Like, no, Top Gun is still clinging for dear life at the bottom of the top 10. I think for sure next weekend it'll be gone. Not that I want it to be honest. Like, it's incredible that it is still here from May to October. It's still in the top 10. But I think next week we'll officially see it go. So once again, goodbye. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Number 1, going with Black Adam. It'll be interesting to see how much it makes because, DC movies can make a lot of money, but, some of these other ones, like, Shazam was a big hit, but, compared to some of the other ones, not as much. And then Birds of Prey came to theaters, and that didn't do all that well. And, 2020 release, but that was like a whole month and a half before the COVID pandemic really went into effect. So, it flopped, it flopped before COVID. And then the Suicide Squad, when that went to theaters, that was kind of a flop, but that was also put on HBO Max, and people, that was like the number one most watched thing on HBO Max for a bit, I believe, or one of those achievements, one of those canned achievements that studios put out there. So it'll just be, I know it's going to be number 1, but it'll be interesting to see how much it actually makes. Number 2, I think will still be Halloween Ends. Then number 3, I'm going with Ticket to Paradise. That movie's apparently making a lot of money worldwide, so we'll see how it does here domestically. I think it'll do all right. I think better than some of the other rom-coms we've gotten in recent memory, just because of the star power behind George Clooney and Julia Roberts. Then number 4, I'm going with Smile, and number 5, Lyle Lyle Crocodile. But what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.